Our epic journey began in Delhi, where we arrived after an 8-hour flight from London. We had a free day, so we hired a coach to take us to see some of the tourist hotspots in the city. First up was the War Memorial at India Gate. Then it was on to the Jama Mosque. Built in 1650, it took 6 years to build and was the largest mosque in India. We paid a short visit to the memorial to Mahatma Gandhi, built in 1998. Then it was on to Humayun's tomb. Built in the 16th century, it was the first Indian building to use a Persian double dome, and the water gardens influenced the design of the Taj Mahal. The tomb is now a World Heritage Site. The 220-foot high Qutb Minar was the tallest structure of its time. Started in 1199 by the Muslim king Qutb, it took 30 years to complete. Of course, a visit to Delhi is not complete without a ride on a rickshaw, and being avid cyclists, we are keen to take a ride on the back seat. But this was no tourist trip to Delhi. Instead, we are in India to undertake one of the most challenging bicycle rides in the world, and for that we had to take an internal flight to Kulu. Kulu was a short drive from the town of Manali, the starting point for the ride. The drive to Manali gave us some idea of the road conditions, as well as the volume of water coming down off the mountains. We also had tantalising glimpses of the foothills of the Himalaya. Although we had flown to Kulu and then drove to Manali, our bikes had spent the last 24 hours in the back of a truck being driven overland from Delhi. Fortunately, the hotel had a large basement where we could reassemble our bikes and check that everything was in good running order. Manali is a busy touristy town. Being the largest town in the northern Kulu Valley, it also attracts locals from the surrounding villages to its busy markets. The bus station in the centre of town is a hive of activity. Manali lies on the Beas River in the Kulu Valley. In order to acclimatise, we went on a short ride down the valley to the town of Nagar.
So it's a 44k ride, 22k each way. When we get there, we're going to have some time to have a look around the place, and then we're planning to be back here for lunch at about 1:30.
Nagar was once the capital of the Kulu Valley, and Nagar Castle was used as a royal residence until the 17th century. When we arrived, we encountered a religious procession who were blessing the chapel within the castle. The castle gave us tremendous views up the valley back towards Manali, where we would begin our epic ride the following day. Our route over the Himalayas took place in the far north of India, surrounded to the west by Pakistan and to the north and east by China, Tibet and Nepal. We were to ride along the Manali to Leh highway. The road was built in the 1980s by the Indian Army following the unrest in Kashmir and was opened to foreign travellers in 1989. It follows an old trading route between the Indian Plains and Central Asia. It travels through the Indian state of Himachal Pradesh before crossing over the border into Ladakh, where it finishes in Leh, the capital of Ladakh. Early morning, and it was time to begin the journey. This was a supported trip, which meant that all of our food, water and clothing would be carried for us. We had a coach that would follow along behind us in case any of us got into difficulty. Well, this is it, the start of our Trans-Himalayan expedition, starting this morning here in Manali at a height of around 2,000 metres. And we're going to climb about 3/4 of the Rotang Pass. We have to take it steady due to acclimatisation. But even so, we're still going to get to around 3,320 metres. That's 11,000 feet, and that's where we'll be camping tonight, after around 39 kilometres of cycling. Fantastic sunny start here in Manali. Let's hope it continues. Before setting off, we were blessed by a Hindu priest and given silk scarves as a token of good luck for the journey ahead. Day one of the ride may only have been 23 miles in length, but it was uphill all the way. Starting at an altitude of 6,200 feet in Manali, we had to climb up to an overnight stop in Mahi at 10,800 feet. That was a height gain of 4,600 feet and would take us 3/4 of the way up to the first mountain pass on the route, the Rotang La. The road conditions on leaving Manali were not exactly ideal. The road followed the River Bias along the valley floor for several miles. We then enjoyed the official start of the road to Leh. Only 474 kilometres to go. Cattle on the road were to become a frequent occurrence over the next few days. Also frequent were the humorous road signs erected by the Border Roads Organisation, the builders and maintainers of the road. The road veered away from the river and began a steep climb out of the valley through a series of hairpins. Our coach would stop at pre-designated spots each day and hand out packed lunches that our support crew had prepared for us. Well, here we are having a very civilised lunch beneath the road, which you can probably see behind me, soaring up to the top of the Rotang Pass. And we're about 2,800 metres here, but a long way to go yet. This paraglider had a great view down into the valley that we had just climbed out of. During the winter, the road is often damaged by avalanches, making the cycling that much harder. All credit then to our bus driver, who seemed to make light work of driving through the mud and over the uneven surface. The road climbed forever upwards through another series of hairpins. We eventually reached our campsite at Mahi, on what was about the only flat bit of ground that we'd seen since we left Manali almost 6 hours earlier. It was straight into the mess tent, where tea, biscuits and freshly cooked chips were awaiting us. So what do you think of it so far, guys and girls?
You're starting to get a flavour of what's to come.
Absolute rubbish.
The intelligence coming down from the top is that
Is it coming rough up there?
the road's not existent.
Oh dear. After that depressing news about the road conditions for tomorrow, we made use of our ensuite washing facilities. It was then early to bed and a long night's sleep. Well, it's 7:15 in the morning now at our base camp below the Rotang Pass. Clouds are starting to lift now from the mountains, so I think we're going to have a really hot, scorching day. But now it's time for breakfast. Rotang is at 3,950 metres above sea level, much higher than I've ever cycled before. So I think we're all feeling a little bit apprehensive about this first climb because we've heard that the road conditions are pretty bad. But fingers crossed, we'll see how we get on. Day 2 of the ride began with a 2,200 foot climb from our campsite at Marhi to the first mountain pass of the trip, the Rotang La, at 13,100 feet above sea level. It was then a long steep descent followed by another short climb and downhill section to our next campsite at Gondola, a distance of 43 miles for the day. It wasn't long before our campsite had receded into the distance. It wasn't long either before the road conditions began to deteriorate. Just below the summit of the Rotang La, we had a short stop for a cup of cha. Then it was off into the mist to the summit. Was it? Summit of the Rotang La, our first big climb of the holiday at 3,950 metres. We're hoping for a better sign on this, but we're assuming this is the top until we see otherwise. Anyway, we now start a long and fairly difficult descent. Rotang La means the pass of the dead bodies, due to the weather which can change very rapidly. As we left the cold and misty summit, we plunged down a series of very rough hairpin bends into the valley nearly 3,000 feet below us. We eventually reached the valley floor and took the road alongside the Chandrabhaga River to the small village of Koksar, where we had our lunch stop. From Koksar, the road followed the banks of the Chandrabhaga River for about 10 miles. The road alternated between tarmac and gravel, interspersed with the occasional flock of sheep. After climbing up to the village of Sisu, it was downhill to our campsite, in a field a few miles outside the village of Gondola. We awoke the next morning at 7 o'clock and were greeted with cups of tea that our support crew prepared for us each morning. Thank you. Day 3 of our Himalayan crossing was a bit of an undulating ride. The good news was that the start from Gondola was downhill, but bad that the end was a steep uphill to our next campsite 38 miles away at Patsio. Patsio at 12,300 feet was also our highest campsite so far. The road followed the river downhill for several miles. Only 372 kilometres to lay. After climbing uphill through a ceremonial gateway into the village of Keelong, the road descended once again high above the Baga River. After a short rest stop, we continued along the road which clung to the mountainside. After a rendezvous with our coach for another rest stop, it was uphill through a series of rough hairpin bends. The road descended back to the valley floor to join the Baga River. We had lunch in Dharka. Being a chocoholic, it was nice to come across some familiar food. From Dharka, we had to negotiate a bridge that was being repaired. It was then the final steep climb of the day. We soon gained a bird's eye view of the bridge that we had just crossed. About 6 miles from the end of the ride, the weather turned wet, and so did the road. The campsite in Patsio was a welcome sight after a hard day's ride. Well, here we are at 7 o'clock in the morning at our campsite at Patsio, beneath the climb of the Baralaka La Col. That's the Baralaka La Col at 4,800 metres. This will be our highest climb of the holiday so far. It's been absolutely awful overnight. It's been throwing it down with rain and high winds, but things seem to have settled down now, although there's still cloud cloaking most of the mountains. It's a 32k climb to the top of the Baralaka La, and we've all got our fingers crossed really, because we understand again that road conditions could be pretty bad, especially with the additional rain last night. To describe day 4 of our Himalayan crossing as hard would be an understatement. Ahead of us from our campsite in Patsio was a 4,000 foot climb over 20 miles to the top of the second pass of the trip, the Baralaka La. At 16,200 feet above sea level, this was the highest point so far on the trip. To put the height into perspective, that's 350 foot higher than the summit of Mont Blanc. From the top it was then downhill to our campsite at Sarhu, a distance of 35 miles. The day began with a short flat section along the valley beside the Baga River. It wasn't long though before the start of the 20-mile climb began. The road surface was fairly rough on compacted gravel, making the going quite tough. We were amazed and relieved to see workmen laying fresh tarmac. So much for emissions control and climate change though. Could this tarmac continue all the way to the top? No, sadly not. It was back to an even rougher and stonier surface. The road began to climb yet another series of hairpins. After a quick stop for refreshments, it was onwards and upwards.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Pat. What a super athlete. There you go. Athleticism in motion. Look at the way she pumps those pedals. Another series of hairpins took us higher up the mountainside, but at least the road service had improved. Just below the top of the pass, we passed the lake of Suraj Tal, the source of the Baga River. Okay, here we are then at the summit of the Baralakla Pass at 4,900 metres above sea level, and the height in feet is now appearing below you on the screen because I can't be asked to work it out at this moment in time. It's bloody freezing, it's raining, but it's been a great climb. Unfortunately, it's just the three of us that decided to stay here and take a picture of it. Oh well, never mind, we've enjoyed it anyway, so here we are. It's all downhill from here. From the summit of the pass, it was a long, fast descent down the valley to the parachute tent village of Bharatpur, where we stopped for lunch. From Bharatpur, we followed the river downhill and through a narrow canyon in the pouring rain. Once through the canyon, the rain stopped and there was a dramatic change in scenery as we arrived at Sarshu. After unloading the bus, we settled into our luxury tents. This was a permanent campsite, often used as an overnight stop by travellers making their way from Manali to Leh. The campsite was next to a dramatic gorge formed by the Sarup River. We were all beginning to feel the effects of the altitude, but we still had some significant climbs ahead of us. Day 5 of the trip, therefore, was one of acclimatisation. From our campsite in Sarku, it was downhill most of the way to our next campsite at Brandy Nala, some 17 miles away. We will still be cycling around 14,000 feet above sea level for most of the day. After following the Sarup River for a few miles, we crossed the border from Himachal Pradesh into Ladakh. After a couple of hours of easy cycling, we'd arrived at our campsite at Brandy Nala. After the easy ride to Brandy Nala, it was back to some more serious climbing. We had two passes to climb. The first involved a series of hairpin bends known as Agata loops to reach the Nakilala at 16,200 feet. After a short descent, there was then another climb to the Lakulung La, which was our first pass to break the 5,000 metre barrier at 16,700 feet above sea level. Thankfully, it would then be downhill to our campsite at Pang, a distance of 33 miles for the day. As our support crew dismantled the tents, we made our way along the valley to the start of the Gata Loops. The Gata Loops are the Alpduas of the Himalayas, 21 hairpin bends climbing 1,500 feet above the valley floor. Once we'd reached the top of the Gata Loops, the road continued climbing. We had a short 11s stop, which gave us a great view down the road that we just climbed up. We also had a view of the climb ahead of us, up to the Nakila La. I had a distant view of the rest of the group at the top of the Nakila La, but it wasn't long before I managed to struggle my own way up to the top. So here I am at the summit of the Nakila La, 16,219 feet above sea level. I have to tell you that was a pretty exhausting climb. I've never been so knackered in my entire life, but well worth it because the views around here absolutely astounding, quite astonishing, unique, fantastic. Trouble is everybody else is gone, they've left me. What have I said? It was a short descent to Whiskey Nula where we had our lunch. All too soon, however, it was back on the bikes for the climb up to the Lakulung La. The altitude and the lack of oxygen was making cycling incredibly hard work. Now. Okay, here I am at the Lakulung La, 616 feet above sea level. You what?
The Lost Long La.
Sorry, the Lost Long La. I'll start again. Here I am at the Lakulung La Pass, highest point so far on the trip at 16,600 feet. I have to say that was a hard climb, but enjoyed every moment nonetheless. And now it's all downhill to our campsite in Pang. Fantastic. But I am absolutely The descent to our campsite near Pang took us through an amazing gorge of terracotta coloured rock. A descent through a series of hairpins finally brought us down to our campsite. The site was in an incredible location, surrounded by wind-eroded rock formations, and it was a great place to relax after an incredibly hard day's cycling. After a hard day climbing over 2 passes, day 7 of our Himalayan crossing was thankfully relatively easy. After a short climb out of Pang, we had to cross the flat Moray Plains to reach our next campsite at So Kar, 32 miles away. After we had climbed up from Pang to reach the edge of the Moray Plains, we had an 11th stop and a chance to take in the view. The plains were an unexpected feature of our Himalayan crossing, and we soon arrived at our campsite at Tso Kar. Well, it's 7 AM on a gorgeous sunny morning. The bed tea has just been delivered, and we've got a bit of a challenge today. We're climbing the Tanglang La, which is the highest point between Manali and Leh. It's also the second highest motorable road in the world. Some challenge, but I think we're all up for it. There was one major obstacle left on the road to Leh, the Tanglang La. This was the highest pass on the route, and at 17,400 feet above sea level, it's also the second highest road pass in the world. Once over the pass, it will be a long descent of over 4,000 feet to our campsite at Lato, 49 miles away. After a flat section of newly laid tarmac, the road began its long climb to the Tanglang La. We could see the road snaking up the mountainside in the distance. A short rest stop gave us a chance to look back down the road we had climbed so far. Then it was onward and upward to the top as the tarmac gave way to a rough and stony surface. Yes! Yes, I made it!
Don't believe him, he came up in the bus!
Brilliant! Well, here we are, the Tanglang La, second highest pass in the world, and you're looking at the second slowest cyclist in the world, since I was second allowed getting up here. But what an experience, absolutely amazing. It's a top of the world view all around, it's quite extraordinary. So it's all downhill from here to lunch. The long descent brought us down into the valley of the Gaya River. As we cycled along the river, we caught our first glimpses of cultivation since leaving Manali. We encountered horses laden with barley. Further down the road, we saw that the barley was being cultivated by the women. We were now in Buddhist Ladakh, and we cycled past many stupas as we cycled down the valley to our campsite. Tonight would be our last night under canvas. We had a great support crew, managed by Dheeraj and Barbara. Our cook had created some amazing meals. Our waiters had helped prepare the food and delivered the bed tea each morning. Our drivers had transported, erected and then packed away our tents each day. And our bus driver had followed along behind us all the way. John, our leader, took the opportunity to thank them all.
Right, okay, so today all of these guys, except the driver, will be going back over the high passes to Manali. And we're going to be setting off on the last leg of our journey, heading down the road to Leh. It's been a fantastic trip, and it's probably a trip that may have been a trip of a lifetime for some of us. It's certainly a journey that probably the majority of us, possibly all of us, would not attempt to do without support and backup. And without the help of all these guys, it would have probably been impossible for us to have experienced the wonderful journey that we've had. So without these guys, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done. We appreciate everything they've done for us. The comfort of the camps has been first class, the food has been first class, and the backup we've had on the road has been first class. And on behalf of everybody here, the whole group, I'd like to say sincerely thank you very much.
Our crossing of the Himalayas was now almost complete. From Lato, it was downhill most of the way to the Indus Valley. An undulating road alongside the Indus would then bring us after one final climb into Leh, the capital of Ladakh, 47 miles away and 317 miles since we left Manali 9 days earlier. From Lato, we descended through a colourful gorge alongside the Gaya River. We passed through several Ladakhi villages. We were now only around 12,000 feet above sea level as we continued to descend alongside the river. We emerged into the Indus Valley, where the scenery changed yet again. As we cycled through the village of Upshi, we saw we only had 49 kilometres to go to reach Leh. The road continued alongside the Indus River for about 20 miles. The smooth tarmac and gentle gradients enabled us to maintain a good average speed. Trees alongside the road were a welcome sight as we arrived in the town of Thiksi. Thiksi Monastery is one of the iconic images of Ladakh. After having lunch in a monastery restaurant, we walked up the steep stony steps to take a closer look. The roof of the monastery gave us a spectacular view down the Indus Valley. It was back on the bikes for the last few miles into Leh. We are now in holiday mood with all the hard miles behind us. We regrouped just outside of Leh for the final climb up to the hotel. The hotel seemed luxurious after spending the last 8 nights under canvas. After a well-deserved evening meal, it was an early night in a proper bed. Leh's importance as a major centre of trans-Himalayan trade is signified by the highly decorated arch over the main road into the city. The city centre is crammed with narrow streets selling all manner of goods. The city is overlooked by Leh Palace. This imposing 9-storey structure was built in the 16th century. Climbing up to the top rewarded us with a tremendous view of the city and the Indus Valley beyond. On the other side of the city is the Shanti Stupa. It was built by the Japanese in 1985 and inaugurated by the Dalai Lama to celebrate 2,500 years of Buddhism. Leh, however, was not the end of our cycle challenge. From the town, a road leads to the pass at Kardung La, which is the self-proclaimed highest motorable road in the world. At a claimed altitude of 18,380 feet above sea level, it would involve a climb of 6,500 feet over a distance of 25 miles from Leh. Well, it's 7 o'clock in the morning here in Leh, and this is the big one. This is the day we're going to climb the Kardung La, the highest motorable road in the world. I must admit I'm feeling a bit nervous about it, but we've climbed something almost as high a few days ago, so this in theory shouldn't be too much of a challenge. But it is 2,000 metres of climbing here from Leh to the top. After regrouping outside of the hotel, we are ready for the off. A series of zigzag bends soon brought us way above the verdant green valley. The altitude was beginning to take its toll. When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. As we gained more height, the road began to deteriorate, and so did I. Well, I'm afraid I failed. Didn't quite make it. Got to about 4,900 metres and I'm completely shattered. So I'm getting a lift now with the support vehicle. I'm a bit depressed about it, but I've done my best. That's more climbing than I've ever done in one day before, so I'm fairly pleased with that. So I'm going to get a lift now to the summit and hopefully take a few shots of people who have actually made it. I'd made it to within 5.5 miles of the summit, but the drive in the support vehicle showed that the road surface got even worse, and I knew I'd never have made it. The summit area was a bit of an eyesore, covered with various signs and thousands of prayer flags. It's customary to add prayer flags when reaching the top, so those of us that cycled to the top added theirs to the collection. 9 of our group of 16 managed to cycle to the top, including our leaders Pat and John.
Well, we're absolutely amazed and dead chuffed to be here, and thanks Mike for taking our picture, otherwise we wouldn't have one together. Thank you.
From the summit area there was a view north into the Nubra Valley and the Karakoram Mountains beyond. Then it was back down to Leh, either by bike or in the support vehicle. Back at our hotel in Leh, our tour leader John gave us a farewell speech.
I had a travel quotation came to mind this morning while I was talking to Mike. It says, "To travel with hope is a better thing than to arrive, for the true success lies in the endeavour." So it's not just actually being here, it's what we've had to go through to get here that sort of really makes it worth doing. I think it's probably almost within living memory that to get to the independent Buddhist kingdom of Ladakh involved a very hard, arduous journey over the Himalayan high passes. Now they've got the airfield and they've got the roads, and if you wish to, you can fly up, hour and 10 minutes out of Delhi, step out the aeroplane and you're up here, and it's all done for you. We chose to do it the hard way, over the high Himalayan passes, and I hope you all think that it was really worth making the effort to get up here. And thanks a lot to you guys. And having said all that lot, it's the longest speech I've ever made in my life. Let's have some food.
We finished our evening meal with a barbecue around the campfire, which gave us all an opportunity to reflect on our own individual achievements during our crossing of the Himalayas by bike.